Thank you, candidate Mike Toffner. We have another caller on the line with a question for our candidates. Howard from Cambridge. Good evening, Howard. Good evening, Howard. Do you have a question for our candidates?
Yes, I can barely hear you.
Go ahead, Howard.
I just wanted to know, only 2 of the 4 candidates actually live in Ward 3, and I know 1 lived there previously, but why would the voters select candidates who are not living in the ward?
Thank you for the question, Howard. We'll hear first from candidate Carl Kiefer.
Thank you. Thank you, Howard, for that question. My feeling all along, ever since I entered the municipal political world, has been that if you do live in the ward, you're speaking from a position of strength. I truly believe that when you're living in the ward, you can relate to the issues and the situations of your neighbors and what goes on there. I do know there's other councillors on the city council that live in other parts of the city and don't live in their wards, and that seems to be the norm these days. But for myself, I'm old-fashioned. I like to stay in the ward. I've lived in the ward all my life, as I mentioned earlier, and for me that works.
Thank you, candidate Carl Kiefer. We'll now hear from candidate Brian Santos.
I am one of those candidates that actually does not live in the ward. And that's not the reason why, I chose to run in Preston for the fact that I believe that it needs a new voice and it needs a new vision. And that's why I chose to run here. I believe we've had 19 great years with Carl. He's served our city well, but I think it's always a good time to have a fresh look and a fresh face, taking care of some new issues. Regarding that, I'm 3 minutes away. I can be reached by any phone call, any email, and I'm very quick at responding to anything. And I've been walking door to door, handing out flyers, talking to individuals throughout the entire ward. And I can say I've walked every street of this area, and I can't say every candidate's done that. And I've really tried to get to know everyone here, and I have tons of family in this area as well, and I feel I can be the best person to represent them if they give me the opportunity to.
Thank you, candidate Brian Santos. We'll now hear from candidate Mike Toffner.
Hi, Howard. How are you? Anyway, Howard, yeah, I've been a lifetime, I grew up in Preston. My wife and I actually are trying condo living, so the best condo we could find right now to see if we could do this was probably up in the Isherwood area, but that's not to say that, all my roots are here. I grew up here, my family grew up here, and we are Cambridge too. So amalgamation tells us that. So I know Preston probably maybe as well as you, Howard, and I think I can do a great job. I know a lot of the people here, and I grew up with them all, and I'm all for Preston because that's my heart, and that's where I grew up and went to school. So, and what else can I tell you?
Thank you, candidate Mike Toffner. We'll now hear from candidate Bev McDowell.
Yes, I do live in Ward 3, but I don't think it matters what ward you live in. As a member of council, you're representing the entire city, the same as Preston, Hespeler, and Galt amalgamated in 1973. All the wards amalgamate when they're sitting around the council table. Every issue is an issue that is dealt with by each councillor. Votes are taken on all wards by all councillors. And hopefully you can decide who is the best person to run for each candidate, not by where they live, but what they represent and what they stand for.
Thank you, candidate Bev McDowell. We'll now hear from our media panel, Glenn Pelche of 570 News. Glenn.
Thanks, Kara. This question, as you said off the top, Kara, questions have to be addressed to all of you. This question is addressed to all of you, but it's going to be addressed by one, when you hear the question, one candidate slightly differently. For 3 of you, I want you to go back to 1973 and recall a time when Preston, Galt, and Hespeler amalgamated and became the city of Cambridge. For the younger candidate, obviously before you were born, you can't envision that. But you could envision what might be lost in the event of amalgamation. So it's a question that you might be reaching out to KW viewers right now, but more importantly, I think it speaks to your passion for the Preston area of Cambridge. The question is, what if anything was lost or is lost when a town, the town of Preston, the town of Hespeler, became part of Cambridge? What is given up during the amalgamation process? And do you, in any way, would you rather, in some way, turn the clock back to the good old days when Preston was its own standalone entity?
We'll hear first from candidate Brian Santos.
Well, you're referring to me as the one that was not around during that period.
Just a lucky guess.
Just a lucky guess. But I do, well, I can tell you my experiences growing up in the city. Okay, when I attended school, I've always had the issues of, especially high school, where people would set boundaries because of Galt, Preston, Hespeler, and where you were from and how you reacted to people around you as well. I always found it was always, it seems like there's a little heartbreak that's kind of grown down, has been passed down to generations, where people from Preston are resenting people from Galt from getting all what they've gotten. And I believe that's something that, you know, that is what we end up losing, and what we end up actually gaining is a little more better relationship with.
Thank you, candidate Brian Santos. We'll now hear from candidate Bev McDowell.
I'd love to turn the clock back to 1973. I think it was a beautiful, I lived in Galt at the time, and that was the time when I had my two sons. There was 2 lanes on Hespeler Road. There was the Satellite Motel. There was the log cabin. It was a wonderful time for me, just being newly married with 2 young children. And I'd love to turn the time back to then. But unfortunately, progress marches on, and we're all 3 together now. I think we have to look at ways to make it one big, beautiful city. And I think one way of doing that is by sharing equally in everything. And at the moment, I feel that too much is going to downtown Cambridge, Galt. More should be going to Hespeler and Preston.
Thank you, candidate Bev McDowell. We'll now hear from candidate Carl Kiefer.
Thank you for the question. Going back to 1973 would be a great dream, and maybe I would like to do it, but we can't set the clock back. 73 was interesting to me. I was nowhere near, of course, a municipal council, and to me, I looked at the situation as you know, a terrible situation at the time. The folks in Preston, Hespeler, and Galt didn't get a vote to deal with the amalgamation. As I mentioned earlier, the provincial government forced the amalgamation and brought the 3 places together. There has been division, as has been mentioned, and of course the rivalries are there. I recall asking the question once about why are things situated more in the Galt locale than in Hespeler and Preston, and of course the answer in those days was that you know, the higher population density was there, and of course it would go there. And that's the reason, one of the main reasons I'm against amalgamation with KW. I'll never support amalgamation, but I will work with the region because that's the way it should be.
Thank you, candidate Carl Kiefer. We'll now commence the closing statements of this evening's debate. Candidates will have 30 seconds in which to present their closing statement. We will hear first from candidate Carl Kiefer.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank 570 AM News and Rogers Cable Television for hosting the candidates' debate this evening. Further, I would like to thank the residents of Preston for their continuous support in electing me as their representative on City Council. Without a doubt, we live in the best city, we live in the best region, and we live in the best province in Canada. I have enjoyed working on your behalf to voice your concerns and represent your interest on Council. For continued leadership, experience, and dedication, please vote for me, Carl Kiefer, at the advanced polls or on October 25th.
Thank you, candidate Carl Kiefer. We'll now hear closing statements from candidate Bev McDowell.
Yes, I'm asking for your vote for Ward number 3 in Preston. I want to bring our city back to fiscal responsibility, and in order to do this, we need to do a lot of work at City Hall. We have to cut back on our expenses, and we have to cut down on our level of spending. And if I am elected, I will do my very, very best.
Thank you, candidate Bev McDowell. We'll now hear closing statements from candidate Mike Toffner.
Well, my fellow Prestonians, here I am, I'm back, and you know what? I really want to be the voice of you people in Preston. I think we need to just get back on track and plan our budget, be more prudent with our spending, and furthermore, I can hardly wait for you guys to come out and vote. Make sure you come out and vote, and make sure it's Mike Toffner. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Mike Toffner. We'll now hear closing statements from candidate Brian Santos.
I'd like to thank everyone for having us here today. But one thing I'd like to say about myself, I was the first candidate and the only candidate to have sent a contract, or will be sent to you, stating what I will do for the city, what I will fight for. I think I've put it on paper and I've signed it stating, so you can hold me accountable for, during my time in office. I want to be there for you. I want to stand up for you. And I'm just asking you to give me the opportunity to prove myself. And go out there and vote.
Thank you, candidate Brian Santos. That concludes our debate this evening. Thank you very much for joining us. For the local campaign, I'm Kara Harrison. Good night.